All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Making Monsters. We are on our final episode of the ninth pick and beyond, getting ready for the draft, what the Bears may do with that ninth pick. We've gone a lot of different ways. We've gone wide receiver, we've gone interior offensive line, tackle, edge, everything you could possibly think of with 9. We've been there, so we're going to continue on with some pretty high names that we're talking about. And I'm joined today by James Williams. He's UCLA football reporter for Bleav UCLA, OC Registers, Daily LA Daily's News, all over the place talking about UCLA football. So James, thanks for hopping on with me.
Taylor, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, and I'm excited that it's draft week.
I know, me too. I feel like it's a little bit of chaos, like when football season ends too
Right.
now, but it's been, especially in the Bears world, because it was like Twitter split of whether we wanted Justin Fields or whether we wanted Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
And it's just been kind of a little bit of mess, but it looks like Caleb Williams will be the new quarterback for the Chicago Bears. We're just now looking beyond that, of how much they can help him in other areas. So number one, what a fun year for the Pac-12, a kind of like going out party for the Pac-12, but it was fun because there's a lot of names I've been talking about over there.
Yeah, it's been kind of interesting, right? Because it like kind of went out in this blaze of glory, right? And you kind of like there's been several games where I was sitting there like, wow, this is really like the final season. Like things are just getting good. Like you had Washington playing for the national championship. You had Oregon being competitive. You had USC always kind of in the mix one way or another with Caleb Williams, and then just the defense for UCLA stepped up. It took a big jump, actually. D'Anton Lynn was the defensive coordinator there before he jumped over to USC. So it was a pretty exciting time, and you're kind of almost bummed that it ended the way that it did. Part of me wonders if it being the final season actually made it like kind of gave it the boost to be what it was, or what happened. But it was a great time nonetheless, and just glad it didn't go out in a whimper.
Yeah, same. And it's going to be an interesting kind of way we're looking at college football coming up. We're seeing rumors of like a super league and all of this stuff. So who knows what college football is going to look like in 5-10 years. But right now we're talking about a lot of players from the Pac-12, and you just mentioned UCLA and their defense. And it's something that we talked a lot about. Pretty much every player I want to talk to you about is a defensive player. So let's just start with Laiatu Latu. He started at Washington, spent a couple years there. His career is interesting. Honestly, a little scary in a few moments. Played in 12 of 13 games as a true freshman at Washington. And then we kind of saw some unfortunate things happen. I know there was a neck injury in there. I think some COVID things involved in that. From what I've heard, he was told to medically retire from playing football, and he decided to continue on, transfer to UCLA, and kind of really picked up his career there. So tell us a little bit about that, what you guys felt first getting Latu over to UCLA, where there's those true concerns about his medicals, and how he fought through all that.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting just because, even I wrote an article for the OC Register about Latu that came out today, and just kind of reevaluating the career that he had at UCLA, and you hear the things that he says is like, they just kind of told him, it was kind of sudden, like, oh, hey, you're done. There's a press conference set up, and we're just gonna announce it. And he's like, wait, whoa, what? Like, and this was, but I believe it was like before his sophomore season. So he spent the year just sitting there, not knowing what's next, but he continued to work out. And I think I believe he told the NFL Network, he probably told some other outlets as well, is that he never thought his career was over, regardless of what the doctors were saying. So he went about getting some second opinions. I believe the surgery he had to get done was done by doctors at the UCLA Medical Center. That is just where you could see it right from the campus of UCLA and the football facility. But he arrives in 2022, and you hear he was a guy who's medically retired, and you kind of hear stuff like that, and you're like, well, I mean, we'll see if they get 4 or 5 games out of him, then that's great. That's a bonus, right? So you're not thinking of much. Chip Kelly was the coach at the time, had some success with guys in the transfer portal, and they're really just, I didn't really have an expectation for Latu, and then all of a sudden he's never really even throughout the year, he's never listed in the starting lineup, but just goes on this blaze of just being dominant week after week after week, and really kind of skyrocketed, just kind of his value and what people thought of him. Ended up being one of 3 players named as the AP Comeback Player of the Year, if I have that right. And then The expectations were just high. He had expectations that he set for himself that were fairly high as well. We talked to him at media day, and he said I think he wanted somewhere. He was looking for a record number of sacks. He wanted to be the leader in sacks, and I believe he got close to it. I believe he was top 5 at the very least. So, yeah, it was an impressive season for him. And, you kind of see these guys where they have these seasons and these high expectations and you're not sure, yeah, we'll see. And usually something kind of goes wrong. Nothing went wrong. And that's the thing. Nothing went wrong with the neck over the 2 years. They didn't have to pull him out and take it easy. There was no concerns. So, there's a lot of talk in the draft world about, yeah, he's going to get, bumped down, or some teams aren't going to have him as high on their board just because of the medical injury and the medical history. There's been no sign of it other than we knew he was medically retired at one point. Kind of reminds me of a guy like Jalen Phillips, took a year off, ends up getting drafted by the Miami Dolphins there. And obviously dealing with an ACL injury, if I'm not mistaken, but nothing wrong with the injury that he was medically retired from. And I think some NFL teams will have some of that same confidence maybe, and they'll look at what Jalen Phillips has done and maybe be able to look at Latu and say, maybe this is another guy that can be like Jalen Phillips and have a healthy career, at least, for the start, and to see what comes of it.
Yeah, and it makes me think of Michael Penix too. He just came out with kind of his message to the NFL GMs, and hey, like, I did deal with these injuries for a couple seasons ago, but I've now been able to start X amount of games, no issues. It hasn't been a problem. So sometimes, and I get certain teams being cautious. The Bears drafted a guy, Tevin Jenkins. Tevin Jenkins had some injury stuff when he was in college. It has kind of lingered into his NFL career. When he's on the football field, he's one of the best offensive linemen in the league, but you have to be on the football field to be that. Right. So obviously I know some people will gauge that to their own, but I do think that when you look at a guy like Latu, number one, clearly the way that he kind of like persevered through everything and was told, hey, stop what you're doing because this is probably going to be dangerous for your future. And then him kind of fighting past that and not only being able to do it, but excel. And you mentioned the 2022 season with you guys. Appeared in 13 games, outside linebacker, 12 and a half tackles for loss, 12 and a half tackles for loss, 10 and a half sacks, which was 8th in the nation, 2nd in Pac-12. So tell us a little bit about that, not only like emotionally for him, because I'm sure this was, you said he had these goals to hit, but also just what you guys saw that season from him and how much he affected your defense.
Yeah, for this past season or for 2022?
For 2022.
Yeah, for 2022, again, like, it was just bonus. It was just extra, right? Like, it was just the defense had been so bad the first few years I was covering the team that any sign of life, you're just looking for anything. And all of a sudden, Latu comes out of nowhere and he just kind of turned it around. He was part of this overhaul of what that defense was. And it was just so funny to see that they were being known as this defensive team now after the first like 3 or 4 years.
Where did this come from?
Right. And let alone the fact it's Chip Kelly is the head coach and he's known as this offensive, mastermind, right? So the last thing you expect is defense. So you probably have these teams that are preparing and studying for the offense. And then especially that 2022 year, you have these guys like the Murphy twins, Laiatu Latu, just kind of come out of nowhere and just like, whoa, what is this? So a lot of that early on, and especially just throughout that 2022 season, they really went on a roll and they gave a competitive game against Caleb Williams during his Heisman season, right? They played and beat Washington and Michael Penix there at the Rose Bowl. So, they beat some teams. They beat some of these quarterbacks that are up there in this first round as well, right? Or at least potentially. So, Laiatu Latu has been an anchor for that defense over the past 2 seasons. And I think any team that's getting him, whether it's the Bears or any other team, I think he will be a nice addition and a guy who should be able to start right away.
What did you see within his 2 years there between 2022 and 2023? If you were to name something that, in your opinion, grew the most out of Latu to why we are now talking about him potentially being a top 10, 15 pick, what would that be?
I think it's just the confidence for him, right? Just being able to know that he was able to do it, because that's always the biggest thing is, and I don't want to say maybe it benefited him that he had to sit out his sophomore season. I mean, you don't want anyone to be hurt and go through the things that he did, but I think having to sit through that sophomore season and that can just take a toll on you mentally, right? As far as like, can I do this again? Am I going to do this again? And then that 2022 season, I can't recall what the expectations were. Maybe he wouldn't have told us publicly what the
Yeah.
expectations were, but he was probably just filling things out for himself and
Yeah.
seeing if he can do this, right? And I think once he gained that confidence in himself after that 2022 season, and there were no injuries, there were no setbacks, he just had all the confidence in the world, set that high expectation, like I mentioned, and just kind of lit the world on fire and really made a name for himself to where everyone, some of the, the different NFL draft analysts I've talked to have said, yeah, he was really on our radar over the summer, going into the 2023 season, and, kind of just came out of nowhere, right? And obviously the COVID year probably helped a little bit.
Yeah.
He could have come back. Actually, he still had the COVID year. But when you're, not when that COVID year really kind of gave him a time, that's the year he was kind of sitting out. So talk about mentally juggling every other thing
Yeah.
that's going on. He's dealing with that aspect as well. So he's overcome some adversity, right? And I think that's something you want in a player. You talk about Michael Penix, for example. Not only did he have those injuries, not only did Latu have those injuries, but they've shown that they can come back from them and have adversity not be something that they're afraid to overcome, right? So if
Yeah.
something comes their way, and even if that's something on the field where they can't think they can get to the edge, or Michael Penix doesn't think he's able to complete this goal line stand or this 2-minute drill, they've dealt with far worse getting up to the point where they're at, that I think it'll put them in a better position going forward.
And so when you talk about UCLA defense, we talked about how they kind of came out of nowhere, they popped. Tell us a little bit, so for maybe some people that didn't get to watch a ton of UCLA football, what type of defense was this? Like, what kind of schematically, what did they run? Where were you seeing Latu on the field where he was at his strongest?
Yeah, they were running a bit of a 4-3.
Okay.
If I had that right, or is it 4-3-3? I may be having that wrong, trying to do my quick math there, but yeah, they were doing a whole lot of stuff, right? Sometimes they were doing a NASCAR package where they had 4 edge rushers. They didn't even have a defensive tackle. They just had the 4 edge rushers. And again, that's just where it all started with the Murphy twins and Latu. And then you had these guys in the backfield. The secondary was, again, we talked about the worst part of the defense over the past few years.
Yeah.
The secondary was bad. And then you have these guys up front that are creating so much pressure that it just opened the door for everybody else. You had Alex Johnson, who's a guy that could be a potential, undrafted free agent here, or maybe a guy that goes in a later round. Darius Moassau, one of the linebackers that was really kind of the captain of that team, a guy who can get drafted somewhere in day 3, possibly. Was that guy in the middle, and he had confidence as well. And I think they all gained confidence just from what the guys up front were able to present. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about the Murphy twins in a little bit, and even the UCLA defense now. Just to give you guys a preview of what's to come out of UCLA, Jay Toya, the defensive tackle that played alongside the Murphy twins, and Laiatu Latu is a guy to look forward to for next year. But they had some talent on that team, and expect a few of these guys to get drafted or to be signed as undrafted free agents. But yeah, it was an impressive run. The tackles for loss, putting pressure. I think the Murphy twins, led the nation in, or at least were top 10 in pressures on the quarterback. So even if they weren't getting sacks or putting the pressure there, the defensive coordinator, Deonta Lynn, for this past season especially, was putting them in positions where they were putting pressure and having their presence be felt, right? To even where if they weren't getting exactly to bring the quarterback down and sacking him, it was creating, Alex Johnson, who I mentioned, had like 4 interceptions, returned 1 for a touchdown against Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
That wasn't happening 2-3 years ago. So it was just impressive. And I think it kind of left UCLA's defense in a place going forward where there's some confidence there. I mentioned Latu's confidence. Latu also gave the rest of those guys confidence too, to kind of play out of their minds. And they were impressive every week.
Yeah, when we're talking about an edge, it's definitely a position the Bears need. They went and signed Montez Sweat last year, so whoever is coming in here is going to be opposite a guy who has really proven himself in the NFL when it comes to rushing the passer, when it comes to creating these pressures, all of these things that Montez Sweat's able to do. And so I think it's a perfect landing spot probably for one of these guys, because they do have that veteran guy on the other side to kind of help them out, but it is somebody who is versatile. A guy that another edge I've talked a lot about this offseason is Jared Verse. And and kind of his duality of all he can do on the on the defensive line. And I feel like Latu is one of those guys too. When we talk, I saw a chart recently actually, and I'm trying to remember that it was like an X and Y axis, but one of them was like pass rush win rate. Another one was, I want to say maybe like how quickly they were getting to, but
it's
the best possible quadrant you could be in. Latu and the Murphy twins were all like clumped together.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I'm like, you're not even like, you don't really even think of these things, but then you start seeing graphs, and PFF is like putting out these numbers, and they're like getting significantly higher grades per week than anyone else. And I'm like, what am I watching? Like, this isn't the what is like, like, let alone you're not used to national media or like other people just even covering or looking at UCLA football. But yeah, it's like you start seeing it in graphs and charts and statistics and all these other things that are beyond me. I'm just like, oh wow, I'm watching something special here, right? I think that was like the biggest takeaway for me. It was like, wow, what a show I'm really watching, and just the future of the NFL there. So it was a sight to see. I do have a question for you actually, and maybe you were gonna you were gonna ask me something along these lines, but I've kind of learned throughout this draft process is that it's all about preference, right? Between those top tier edge rushers, Laiatu Latu, Jared Verse, Dallas Turner.
Yeah.
Who do you see them drafting? And if it is Latu, because Latu's kind of being slated there as this second half guy, just because it's such an offensive heavy first round.
Yeah.
Even though some consider Latu one of the better defenders, if not the best defender in the draft. Do you think they're taking him at 9? Or do you think they're trading and moving around to make something work to where they're getting him on the back end?
So
it's going to get competitive for him.
I know. And that's so to me, I feel like Latu and Verse for me. So me personally, the fit for Jared Verse is the best for what the Bears do. But I don't think Jared Verse is worth the 9th pick. I would more so 13, 14, 15 area for Jared Verse. And I feel like Latu might be similar, maybe right around that area. So for me, though, a lot of people are saying, because the Bears only have 4 draft picks this year. So a lot of people are saying that maybe they'll trade back from 9 to 13, 14, 15. And then this would be kind of a perfect landing spot to get a Jared Verse or a Latu. And then also you're getting capital too, because somebody would be giving you probably a 2nd round pick, which they do not have one right now. So when I talk about some of these guys, it may be more in that area. But when you look at the Bears' biggest needs outside of quarterback, which will be addressed with pick number 1, you're looking at wide receiver, edge, interior offensive line. Those are the 3 big needs. And when I put them in order, I say edge is the next. And I know some people, we go back and forth of how you want to give Caleb all the weapons. And, he has DJ Moore and he has Keenan Allen. But you could solidify that wide receiver room if you were able to get a Rome Odunze or somebody like that. But for me, if one of those 3 guys aren't there, it has to be edge, in my opinion, just because it is, to me, that next dire need for them. So it is interesting because it's like, do you draft one of these guys if you love him a little higher than maybe somebody else would, but you feel like a Latu or a Verse would fit your scheme and would be able to come in and plug and play and be opposite Montez Sweat? I feel like maybe they would reach a little. But I don't know what Ryan Poles, he's not giving us anything, so I'm not totally sure. Before we go on, because I do want to talk about both of these Murphy brothers, but if somebody were to ask you, like, hey, if I should go watch one particular game of Latu just to kind of get an idea of what you'd get, is there a specific game that you would point to?
Yeah, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he put on a game against Washington, and that might have been the 2022 game. Obviously, having been on the Washington team, that was probably a significant game for him. But obviously, just any of the games against USC, right? I think the one in 2022 against Caleb Williams was one that they felt they needed to win, right? And then again in 2023, there was a lot of job status stuff for Chip Kelly, but they played lights out. And again, there was this one clip that went around for the 2023 game where USC was literally trying to double team and put 2 guys on Latu, and Latu just like did this little spin dance move and got through both of them and got hands on Caleb Williams, right? It was like you could put 2, 3, 4 guys on him, and he's gonna find a way to get as low as possible. And he's proud of himself for how he's able to get low and kind of bend and be explosive, right? And that shows on the tape. Go watch the USC versus UCLA game. and you'll see what Latu is able to do, especially against a quarterback like Caleb Williams. A lot of you guys will probably be getting very familiar with. Imagine those two on the same team, right? Imagine them being teammates.
I know. That'd be pretty crazy. And obviously they're familiar. I was about to say,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that Bears fans right now want to go watch a game where Caleb Williams was getting sacked too much.
Yeah,
but
that's true. That's true.
But it's obvious he's not an easy quarterback to get down. Like there's moments, there's a reason. And people say there's similarities between him and Patrick Mahomes because the way that Patrick Mahomes can make things happen when he's being pressured from all sides and crazy things like that are happening. And Caleb had that ability. So to have a guy like Latu who was still able to do what he did against a guy like Caleb Williams is pretty crazy. I want to talk. So let's move to Gabriel Murphy first. He's a little higher up on a lot of the draft boards for people. They talk about maybe like physically not physically gifted for a lot of people of maybe the size and stuff that you want for that position, but they talk about his football IQ, just like the smarts of his position that he's able to really like take the concept in. They talk about hands. I'm not one of those people who are like know exactly everything they're talking about when they talk about hands, but that's something they're talking about. But just being able to all of those things kind of lead him to be the pass rusher he was able to be. And we're talking about a UCLA line that had Latu and Murphy twins all playing edge. So like you said, it was kind of an interesting concept for the way they did the defense. But thoughts on Gabriel Murphy, some expectations of him possibly at the next level?
Yeah, I think he has all the tools to be great, right? And I think I've seen some people say, what, Latu, yes, but like, don't be surprised if Gabriel Murphy is the one who's going to be the one that is, has the better career overall. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, but but they're right there, and they're all together, and they all complemented each other. So it's kind of hard to say who did what for who, but the one thing that was interesting, I believe, in the NFL Combine, and we'll talk about the Grayson Gabriel Combine thing in a minute because that was kind of bothersome, but they had Gabriel at linebacker, I believe, because he was doing stuff with Darius Moasa on the linebackers at the Combine, and I was like, oh, that's different because he didn't really play a lot of linebacker, but maybe they see him making that fit. And maybe, again, speaking about his IQ and what he brings to the table, I think he could be a guy. Maybe they put him at middle linebacker and have him rush up the middle and kind of do his thing in that way. I think he's one of those guys that is probably pretty flexible. And again, I think he does have all the tools to kind of be great. And will he be better than Latu? I don't know. But, I think he proved himself. And some people who believe in the numbers say numbers don't lie. Look at the PFF numbers for hurries, pressures, tackles for loss. They're all in the mix. They're in the mix for all of it. So, yeah.
So when you're talking about, because obviously Gabriel, when you're looking at this draft board, so this is PFF's, which obviously theirs is all analytical and stuff like that. So Gabriel Murphy, they have as the 149th best player, and Grayson Murphy, they have at 187. So there's a decent gap between those two. Like you said, who's to know of really exactly when you have all three of those guys on a line, it's pretty wild to watch. But when you talk about their relationship in general, being twins, being both on a defensive line together, could you guys notice already kind of that extra competitive edge they had because of being on the same line as your brother?
You know what? I'm a twin myself. So I always took like an interest in these two and like watching them, right? Because I remember like in elementary school, they would get me and my brother confused and they'd call me his name and this and that. So I was able to relate to them on a lot of different levels. So I would just kind of watch them, and they came across like such like two most humblest dudes ever, right? Like you wouldn't think the people off the field and the two monsters that are on the field are the same people, right?
Yeah.
But they're so humble. They're so complimentary of each other. Just like the way they encourage things, they, answer, they kind of finish each other's sentences and stuff like that. But it's so funny if you go back and listen or just watch any of the UCLA games. There's always a little extracurricular activities. There's always a little extra something going on there after the whistle's blown, where they're giving a little late, nudge or a push, or you could hear like the camera's on the ref, but Gabriel or Grayson Murphy's kind of walking by the ref in the back, trying to give someone an earful of something. Like they're very chatty, right?
I
And
love it.
you know, there's probably a penalty or two or three that maybe, you know, were a result of some of that, but I don't think anyone on UCLA's defense or just UCLA in general, you know, minded that kind of attitude, that aggressiveness
Yeah.
on the field, that competitiveness, right? So
Yeah.
that you're getting dogs. You're getting
Yeah.
dogs
Love
if
it.
you're getting the Murphy twins.
I love it. It reminds me just of that of a guy we had, Akeem Hicks. He was a bear for
Mm-hmm.
a while. Love Akeem Hicks because I always just called him more of like a teddy bear because when he was on the field,
Mm-hmm.
he was terrifying. Like I would not want to come across Akeem Hicks on the football field. But
Mm-hmm.
off, he was like goofy and laughing, always messing with
Yeah.
people on the sideline. He would like
Mm-hmm.
mess with the guys on the line if they missed a block. Like he'd get kind of angry, but still be like, bro, like, how'd you miss that? And it was just fun. So it'll be interesting to see where these two guys go. I hope it's somewhere where we get to see them play against each other, like teams
Yes.
play against each
Well,
other right away.
okay.
That'd be fun.
So interesting, but like for me, it's almost like, again, as a twin, I'm like, no, you can't, like, because they've done
Don't split them
everything
up.
together, right? Like, don't split them up. Like, trust me, I would not be surprised if they end up on the same team. There, I think it might happen where it may work out. They're on the same team, but it was so funny. We would do, you know, media availability and do interviews with them, and they always had to do them together. They did everything together, which was why it was almost so heartbreaking when Gabriel gets invited to the NFL Combine and Grayson doesn't.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like looking at the list, like, how is this possible? And like, how is the other one? How is Gabriel even going to do not having Grayson there? Like, what is going on? So, yeah, it was so weird. Like, yeah, pro day, you know, Grayson obviously had to do a little bit more of the workout stuff because he didn't do the combine. So it was the first time where they did not look identical.
Yeah.
He had his beard shaved. Gabriel had his beard still there. And it was like, this is like going to be so weird, but maybe it was a little inkling. Yeah, it's already starting to happen. No, but
it's interesting that combine because I felt they could have almost just done a little like twin switcheroo where one of them come for the first half and then they switch in the locker room and the other one finishes and then you never know. You're like, which one are we drafting? Right. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I couldn't tell them apart. I could not tell. Some people on the teams where they could tell them apart.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to tell them apart.
Oh my gosh. So, I love that. And that's what obviously it would be cool. I think on the same team would be cool. But I do think that like little fieriness, I go back to guys like Kyle Long and Chris Long. And I remember Kyle Long's first game in the NFL. Obviously Kyle Long was a Bear. And I remember the first game, like where they played each other, Kyle Long ended up getting in trouble because he was a little extra. One of the guys late hit our quarterback. He went after him and it started a little scuffle and it turned into something. And Chris Long, his brother, sprinting across the field to go help his brother. And I was like, oh, they love each other. But it is like, and you would honestly, I feel like if they're on different teams, it would be interesting to have like same division though. Like if they were, you know, like somewhere, if it was, let's say it's the Bears, let's say the Bears get one of them and then the other one goes to like Green Bay or Minnesota. Like it would just be one of those things where it'd be like, you know, you would have that extra. We had it already with Amon-Ra St. Brown and then Equinemius St. Brown. Yeah. They played against each other in the same division. We also have the Lions have Penei Sewell. We have his brother, Noah Sewell. So it would be funny to add another brother.
Another man. Yeah.
Against each other.
That's true.
So what are your thoughts though, before I let you go, your thoughts on these three? Would you expect each of them to be able to be a plug and play type of guy, or would you expect some time to maybe develop a little bit before we're seeing all three of them on the football field?
I think Latu's ready to go. Maybe I think there might be a little concern about what he does in the rush game or maybe as a run stopper, but it's like he's more known just for what he does as a pass rusher, right? And I mean, I don't think there was ever anything in the run game where I'm like, oh, that was Latu's fault. So, you know, it kind of remains to be seen at the next level. But I think for what he brings to the table, I think he'll be ready to go. And you kind of expect that, right, from a first round pick. But when it comes to the Twins, you know, maybe they're not starting right away in any capacity on the defense, but maybe they're in those special teams roles early on and they kind of, you know, work their way into whatever roles come for them. But I think at the end of the day, I think the Twins especially will go on to have good NFL careers, right? And have some impact for a team and maybe be, you know, one of those guys where the fans end up just loving them at the end of the day. I think the Murphy twins are definitely those kind of guys. And then Latu, as long as things, remain on the up and up with him as far as his health and everything, which it has been, I think he has a chance to be great and have a great run as well in the NFL. So looking forward to it. It's been the dream for all three of those guys. And it's just kind of fun, right? Like I try not to root for UCLA as someone who just covers them from a media standpoint. But once these guys kind of move on to the NFL and you kind of, watch them go through this adversity and all the things at the college level, and you kind of watch them go into the pros, I'm excited and I'm excited for them and look forward to following their journeys. So.
Yeah, and believe me, I do. So this podcast, Making Monsters, during the off season, it's a little different because it's geared towards who, draft day and then after draft day. But during the season, I actually just cover players. So I'll pick a player that's been playing well. I'll go back and talk to high school coaches and college coaches and brothers and dads and kind of get their story of how they got to the NFL. And their path, and some are crazy, some were dancers at one point and started playing football their junior year. Right. Yeah. It's wild. Actually, you might know Kyler Gordon. He played for Washington for a while. He was a dancer forever. But it's I love those stories because it does add a whole other extra element outside of football. And a lot of people don't know that stuff either. We know their star rating when they were coming out of high school and how many sacks they had in college. But do you know like what they kind of had to go through with their family or what they had to go through to even kind of get noticed in high school? And those are the cool stories. But I've been asking everybody this too. And since you have watched games closely, what are your thoughts on Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I was wondering if you're going to ask me this question. It's just impressive, right? And I could see the Patrick Mahomes comparisons and stuff, and you're just like, tackle him. Like he looks like he's right there, and you like just tackle him. Like what do you, he has he's on his tippy toe on the sideline, and he just completes his pass like it was like he does it every day, right? And you're just like, how does this guy do these things, right? So he's such a great player. He's so talented. I haven't been able to spend a whole lot of time around him, but whenever we see him at media day, he's such a, he doesn't hide off to the corner and kind of keep to himself. He's very out there. I know people say things about him painting his nails and all that, but he's such like a humble dude. And he's out there. He was being competitive with, I'm forgetting what player it was. He was either from Washington or Utah, but they were just kind of talking smack to each other, him and Caleb Williams, and they're like, let's go back to the ping pong table, and they were like getting all into it and stuff, and they were just playing ping pong back and forth. And I think the USC representative had to come over and be like, yo, like, can we settle this down a little bit? We don't need you getting hurt during media day. Yeah, it's getting a little heated, right? It was all in good fun, but it was getting heated to the point where they were, you don't want one of them to turn an ankle playing ping pong when you have the whole season ahead of you. But that's just the kind of competitor that Caleb Williams is. And I think he's going to play with the chip on his shoulder, just because of all the things that are being said about him and that were said about him. But great player overall. There were some questions about what that offensive line kind of was during his time at USC. So if he's able to play in front of a solid offensive line, imagine what things he can do with no pressure on him to the point where he's having to run for his life on the outside and just try and find an open receiver. So curious to see how things work out for him in Chicago.
Yeah, we are definitely interested. We've been through a lot of quarterbacks. We've been I don't even, at this point, I can't even keep up with how many even in the last 10 years. So somebody actually like at the radio station I work with went through a list of the last 15 years, and like they kept reading it. I was like, did you guys really have to do that to me? Because this is miserable to hear some of these names that were starting in Chicago. But so hopefully things start to change, because it is a team that they've built. They've spent 2 years now putting a lot of money, a lot of draft picks, a lot of effort in general, and fixing all of the pieces that unfortunately Justin Fields did not have. He kind of was there for that rebuild, and now that it's built, he got sent off and a new quarterback's coming in. But it is probably a better situation than most rookie quarterbacks come in with that top few picks, because most of the time, obviously, if you're drafting in the top 5, you probably sucked last year. The Bears didn't. The Bears just had the pick because of the Panthers trade last year. So it's an interesting world, but we'll see. But again, thanks so much, James, for hopping on with me. I really appreciate it. I know this will be a fun draft day for you too, to kind of see where these guys go. So enjoy it, have fun, and thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And best of luck to the Bears. And I guess Caleb Williams isn't a bad first place prize there for them.
Yes, there you go. Oh yeah, Bears and Bears. We got a lot of Bears on this podcast.
A lot. Bruins and Bears. Yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.